Hey everybody, the shiur we just did on Jewish intimacy was, Baruch Hashem, a very high level shiur. In fact, the Ramban says that most people should not learn this particular section. It simply is too much for most people that haven't elevated themselves and are not entitled, if you will, to learn the secret that's in the shiur. Now, I know that a lot of you are simply going to want to watch the shiur specifically because of that. And I understand, but I can tell you that it's not going to connect with most people simply because there's some really serious secrets here. Put it this way. Until now, the Ramban has taught us to elevate our perspective, our mindset when it comes to intimacy. Tonight, we learn the secret of how to elevate our souls. It's very different than anything you ever heard, and it's extraordinarily exciting and intellectually stimulating, but it requires some work. Enjoy the shiur if you're going to end up watching, and let me know what you think. Kol Tuv. B'Shem Hashem Naaseh v'Natzliach, Shiur Torah, Bruchim Habayim. We are back here on our Tuesday night Jewish Intimacy series. The series, Baruch Hashem, has certainly transformed many lives, Baruch Hashem, of some very serious families, Baruch Hashem, some families of Rabbanim, Avrechim, from people, as well as people that are Baalei Tshuva and regular everyday people. It's certainly a series that has improved not only their lives, but anyone that learns this will certainly, have a completely different perspective of things. So far, the Ramban has, in his Iggeret HaKodesh, has transformed our minds, our perspective of how to view intimacy. But tonight, it's going to be different. Tonight, it's going to be the Ramban giving us a secret, where he calls it the secret of all secrets, regarding intimacy, regarding the cherubs, and regarding the servitude of Hashem, that is actually not meant for everybody. In fact, if a person is not already on a, I would say, either an elevated status or at the very least, someone that's already on elevating themselves, I highly recommend you simply don't watch the shiur. It's something that the Ramban himself actually says, and you'll understand later if you don't listen, because I know that these types of messages sometimes make people want to watch it even more. But before we do, just an update for everybody. Tonight's show is going to be for the Refuah Shlema for Rabbanit Levana Bat Sarah, Rabbanit Sarah Bat Anat, Rav Ephraim Ben Shulamit, Avi Mori David Ben Esriya, Imi Morati Doris Bat Jora, all of Am Yisrael, all the righteous Noahites, all the wonderful people that continue to contribute to the organization, Be'ezrat Hashem. We are just a few days away from completing the cyclical calendar, and here in the States, for anyone that is makes their largest donations before the end of the year, this is the time to do so. We only have a few days, and I know that some people sometimes regret they don't donate the money before the end of the year because they end up ending, just paying that money in taxes. That's one. The second thing is we actually need the help. We need a lot of help right now. We certainly took a lot more than any other year or all the years put together this year, and there's a lot of help that's needed for anybody that wants to help us, whether it's the different projects we're working on, the lawsuit against the missionaries, the headaches, the wonderful things, the place that we're trying to get, all the amazing things that we have. There's plenty of reasons to donate. Of course, helping the poor is something that we do on a weekly basis. I've told you guys many times I don't have the time or the ability to, post a new campaign every time there's a new cause. We just do whatever we can, and we help whoever we can. But there's certainly a lot of needs. So anyone that wants to be generous, this is the time to do so. Aside from that, we said last week that there's we have a raffle for the last few weeks For anyone that contributes to the Gehenom campaign, the movie has, Baruch Hashem, reached thousands of people. Every single one of those people, with the exception literally of one person that has actually watched the movie, has told me that it's transformed their lives. The one person that said it didn't watch the whole movie, that she only watched 1 hour before she gave up because she simply doesn't want to do tshuva and she didn't want to continue hearing the truth. Everyone else, you could simply see the comments on the movie. It's been an explosive transformation for a lot of people, both frum, baalei tshuva, converts, anyone that simply watched it, saw the sources. Sometimes you'll see people make comments before they actually watch the movie. They simply just make themselves look silly. That's why we highly recommend everyone to watch the film before you make any comments, any assumptions, and even any ideas you have about what you think you know about the subject of reward and punishment, specifically when it comes to Gehenom. Because the movie has 172 Torah sources listed in it throughout the film, and then in a list format at the end for anyone that wants to go and spend the next several months or years researching those sources. By all means, we have them listed for you. You are more than welcome to go research them and see for yourself, or you could just simply take the movie at its word, since we have no benefit in simply scaring the hell out of people, literally. The truth is that the movie is only a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what's available out there in the Torah as far as the information, but we did our best. Now, as far as the those that did contribute to the campaign, we had 2 winners so far that, each week I think we've chosen a winner. One of the donors to the campaign, people that donate different amounts of money, whatever the amount is, some more, some less. We picked 2 winners so far that won the $500 talit gadol with the beautiful atara. This is another new one I just opened right before the shiur. It's comes with a really beautiful blue atara, and if anyone that donates between now and the end of the year will be put into that raffle. One winner will be announced, but there is a winner for the last week. There's a winner for the last week, which we'll announce right now, Be'ezrat Hashem. And let me see what I picked. Ilyazar Lak, Tzaddik, you won a talit gadol. Shrecha v'ashrech elkecha, Be'ezrat Hashem, over the next week or so, you'll have it arrive at your address that we have here from your donation. I think it's a business or a house, whatever it is. We'll send it over there unless you want it sent to a different address. Also, for those of you that prefer, instead of the talit gadol, if you already have one and you prefer to get our USB set, that's also $500. I think even a little more or less. I think it's the same price. We could, instead of the talit set, you can get the USB. But that's up to you. You just have to let me know what you want us to send you. But this one, Be'ezrat Hashem, will be sent out tomorrow. It's a beautiful set. It's a beautiful talit, just like the one that I told you I have. And Be'ezrat Hashem, you'll enjoy it and do a lot of mitzvot with it. So, with that being said, we are going to begin the shiur. As I've said, this shiur is very different. It's similar to last week, but it's if a person is not clean in their mind, they're simply not going to follow. They're not going to follow. It's not really. We're not going to go into what people think we're going to go into right now. Where if you're already thinking that, then obviously that's a problem. But the point is that we're going to go into something that is part of the secret part of the Torah that is not meant for everyone. And again, I only emphasize it simply because it's the Ramban says it, and we were actually contemplating skipping this shiur. Rabbi Freiman and I talked about it, and we decided to go forward with it. Since the information is out there, and we'd rather people get the information the right way, rather than simply read it on their own and just simply go to the wrong conclusions. So far, as I've said, the Ramban has given us a completely different perspective about the issues of Kedusha, the holiness of the Jewish couple, the intimate act specifically between a husband and a wife. And one of the things that the Ramban has been battling is not only the perspective that people have to have, but also to remove the confusion that people have, such as the one that was brought by Aristotle, Imach Shimo, that literally brought such a horrible perspective about the issues of intimacy, that he literally made it seem the same way like the Christian church does, which is that intimacy is forsaken, ugly, disgusting, and so on. Interestingly enough, they don't follow their own rules, but nonetheless, the idea is out there, and unfortunately, this type of perspective, does cause marriage problems, does cause anxiety, does cause a lot of issues. But you would be surprised that it actually causes some people to become even more promiscuous as a result of their lack of confidence, their anxiety, where even if they're disgusted by it, they're actually even more intimate. So it's not necessarily something that would automatically give a person the reaction that you would think it would give them. Needless to say, it's something that a person needs to remove from their heart, and that's really the goal. Now, when a person knows that there's something that's good for them, they may or may not listen to it. But when a person knows that there's something that is holy and is decreed by HaKodesh Baruch Hu, and in fact is the holiest of holy, then it puts everything on a different level. And this is in essence where we're going to go with the Shiur today, to really give us a better idea of the greatest secret that's unknown in the world today by the vast majority of people that haven't studied this subject intensely, and needless to say, have not sanctified themselves to even having a concept of what the holy words of the Ramban are about to unfold. Now, the Ramban finished off the last segment by telling us that it follows that marital union is a means of great spiritual elevation when it's properly practiced. So already we understand that one of the ways that a person has to start looking at their intimacy between them and their wife, between her and her husband, and not girlfriend, boyfriends, and not all of that other stuff, which we'll get to further down the road. The issue, the concept of intimacy between a husband and his wife is part of the servitude of God. It's not just an act to produce children. It's not just an act to alleviate the desires. It's not just an act of lust. We're not animals. And needless to say, it is not something that should be frowned upon. But at the same token, it is one of the things that a person can use in order to elevate themselves to the highest level they possibly can. And that's actually one of the messages, the primary message of the Ramban today, which is that if the intimate act between a husband and his wife is done in accordance to what the Torah says, it is literally the holiest of holy, meaning it is something that can elevate this couple or even the individual to a higher level than any other act they can possibly do on planet Earth. Everything, whether it's putting on tefillin or doing blessings or praying or even studying Torah. This act could actually elevate a person's neshama, his spiritual status, and his servitude to a higher level than anything else out there, if it's done right. But in order to do that, they need to know the secret and have a good understanding of what is the purpose behind all of it. Why is it so significant even? So the Ramban continues and he says, and the secret that is greater than this secret, meaning everything that he already told us last week, the secret that's greater than this secret is the secret of the Cherubim. The Cherubim are the cherubs who are depicted in the form of a male and female. If they were something loathsome, the Master of the universe would not command us in His word, nor to put it in the holiest and purest place of all. Rather, it is the very deepest secret of God. So for anyone who doesn't know, or even if you do, just to give you a review, there are levels of Kedusha, levels of holiness that Hashem instilled into the world. There is the holiness of Eretz Yisrael. Then after that, there was the holiness of Jerusalem. Then the Har HaBayit, where the temple was. Then the Azara, which is the gate to the Har HaBayit. Then you have the Ulam, which is inside the Bet HaMikdash. Then the Echal. Then the Kodesh, which is where the menorah was, the altar. And then finally the Kodesh Kodashim. The Kodesh Kodashim was the holiest place in the world. It is where the Aron HaKodesh was. It is where the cherubs were, on top of the Kodesh Kodashim, on top of the Aron HaKodesh. And these cherubs were something very different. Something very different than anything else that we had at the Bet HaMikdash, for multiple reasons. Now, first, where do we learn about these cherubs? In the Torah, in the book of Exodus, Parashat Trumah, in chapter 25, Hashem commands us to have these Cheruvim, cherubs, or Cherubim. And it says in chapter 25, verse 19, ועשה קירוב אחד מקצה מזה וקירוב אחד מקצה מזה. מן הכפורת תעשו את הכרובים על שני קצותיו, והיו הכרובים פורסי כנפיים למעלה, שוחחים בכנפיהם על הכפורת ופניהם איש אל אחיו, אל הכפורת יהיו פני קירובים. It says, and you shall make one cherub from the end at one side, and one cherub from the end at the other side. From the cover shall you make the cherubim at its two ends. The cherubim shall be with wings spread upward, sheltering the cover with their wings, with their faces towards one another. Towards the cover shall be the faces of the cherubim. So here the Holy Torah tells us that there's a commandment from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have these two cherubim. Now, what is really the significance of these cherubim is what we're going to try to learn tonight. But more than anything else, we've already been notified by the Holy Ramban that the secret of all secrets lies in the cherubim. What it has to do with the intimate act, what it has to do with the servitude of Hashem, what it has to do with Hashem's love for Am Yisrael, more than anything else in this world. Now the Ramban elaborates and he says, or warns, guard this secret without revealing it to any man unless he surely is fit for it. For from this you will see the secret of the elevation of the proper union. And this is the secret of which it is written regarding the construction of Shlomo HaMelech, the holy temple, where in the Kings 1, chapter 7, verse 36, it says, he engraved on its surface, on its sides, and on its insets, cherubim, lions, and palm trees, with wreaths round about. So here the Ramban, first and foremost, tells us that if the holy act of intimacy was loathsome, was disgusting in the eyes of Hashem, was frowned upon, was anything less than holy, then obviously why would he have the secret to intimacy inside the Kodesh Kodashim with the cherubim? Second thing he tells us is that this particular secret is a secret of all secrets that will reveal how a person can elevate themselves to the proper union. And it's not something that you simply tell to just anybody, not only because they won't understand it, but sometimes they could even misuse it. Now, as far as the cherubim, we have to learn a little bit of background. Aside from obviously that Hashem's commandment for us to have these cherubim, we have to know what they are. Now, the Ramban brings a pasuk from Kings 1, chapter 7, verse 36. And he says that in the Bet HaMikdash of Shlomo HaMelech, there was these cherubim were in there. And the Baal Metzudot, the commentary of the Metzudot, says that these cherubim were like the unity between a man and his wife. Inside the Kodesh Kodeshim, alongside with other images on the walls, engraved on the walls of the Kodesh Kodeshim of a man and his wife. Now, David HaMelech says on this, which is what the Rambam continues, and on this David HaMelech said in Psalm 69 verse 21, Cherpa shavra lebi ve'anusha. Reproach has broken my heart, and I am gravely ill. Our sages said about this in the Midrash Echa in Ptichta, chapter 9, that when the Ammonites entered the sanctuary, they said, "Behold their God." And they commented, "What are they doing?" And they defamed the Cherubim. So first we're told that these Cherubim, these cherubs, were something that symbolized the unity between man and his wife, and actually is something that's going to reveal us how a person can elevate their servitude of Hashem to the highest level through this. On the other hand, we're hearing from David HaMelech that this is actually something that broke his heart. The issue, what happened with the Ammonites when they saw the cherubs, they actually defamed them and made fun of Am Yisrael as a result of it. So obviously we have a pretty wide gap between the two. So in order for us to understand what the Cheruvim were, we have to go to our sages. Our holy sages will give us an understanding. The Rambam, in his Moreh Nevuchim, in the third section, chapter 45, he discusses it. And the Rabbeinu Bachya, in this commentary on Parashat Trumah, in the book of Exodus, chapter 25, verse 18, he elaborates on what the Rambam is actually saying with some further extrapolation. And he says the following: according to the plain meaning, in regards to this, you construct these two cherubs. According to the plain meaning of the text, the reason that such figures of angels were placed both in a tabernacle and in a permanent temple is to keep alive the idea that there are such beings whom God designated from time to time to perform miracles on earth. Just as we have commanded to have a firm belief in the existence of God Himself and the fact that He is the original existence, and this is one of the fundamental concepts of the Torah as proven by the first words of the Ten Commandments, I am the Lord your God, so are we required to believe in the existence of angels as the second fundamental concept in the list of our religious beliefs. Had there not been such angels, meaning instruments by which Hashem makes His will known from time to time to His prophets, there would be no prophecy, no Torah, and in short, no hotline to the Creator. This is why God commanded that these figures be made and installed inside a tabernacle where nobody could see them. So first and foremost, the Rabbeinu Bachya is telling us that the cherubs are a representation of one of the fundamental beliefs that a Jew has to have, which is the belief that angels exist, and in fact, We need them to exist because this is a way that Hashem allows us to know what He wants from us. Through the prophecies, through the Torah, and had it not been through these channels that He created, we would not know what He wants. So just like we're commanded to believe in Him and His existence and Him being the primary being, we have to obviously believe in the ways of communications in His creations and obviously the endless amount of angels that He has. The reason that two such angel-like figures had to be made was to ensure that none of us would think that the solitary angel-like figure represented the Creator Himself, the one whom we worship and serve. So he tells us that the reason why there's two of them, first and foremost, is because if there was only one, people would naturally think this is maybe an image of God. They would either think they were idol worshippers, or they would become an idol worshipper by serving this image. So there had to be two. But that's not the only reason. If you were to reply that by making two such figures, people might conclude that there are two domains, meaning two, that God shares power with another, this is not a valid objection, seeing both of these cherubs' wings were pointed upwards, as the verse said, that their wings pointed upwards towards the heavens, indicating that they themselves were recipients of divine input rather than the original dispensers of divine bounty. This is the Maimonides, the Rambam's view concerning the cherubs, which he wrote in the Moreh Nevuchim, slightly different words, but in essence the same exact concept. Now, Rabbeinu Bachya now elaborates. Seeing that I believe that the cherubs represented the existence of the angels, and there are many angels, we can surely say that the word Cherubim, cherubs, was chosen to convey the idea that there are many such beings. This is also why God Himself is described in Psalm 80 verse 2, sometimes as Yosheva Cherubim, the enthroned above the cherubs. God is described there as taking care of flocks of such cherubs, and according to the Gemara Masechet Sukkah, page 5, the meaning of the word Kiruv is the same as Kirivya in Aramaic, which means young child. And from the above it appears that the word Cheruvim has two meanings. One being the multitude of something, and two being children. In both of these meanings, the first letter Chaf is not part of the actual noun, but an additional. It symbolizes the Kiseh, the throne of God. And in fact, we have a tradition that the name Kiseh is based on the letter Chaf, and at the same time, the letter Chaf also alludes to the word or attribute of kavod, honor. And we have already explained that this is the attribute of God which occupies the throne. The function of some of the angels is to welcome this attribute of God, and it is written, Ukvod elu Hashem, Israel alem ilmala, and the attribute of kavod, of the Lord Hashem of Israel, was above them, the cherubs. So first, I know that this is very complicated to some of us, and certainly not an easy thing to understand, but in so many words, you have HaKodesh Baruch Hu, and the king is too extraordinary to be his own servant. Hence the reason why the greater the king, the more servants he has. Now, in the way that the King of Kings, HaKodesh Baruch Hu, brings his will to the world is through different channels. As we discussed last week, there are multiple different worlds that he, you can call it spiritual pipelines of how he brings the sustenance to people, spiritual sustenance, financial sustenance, and otherwise. But also there is the throne of glory. The throne of Hashem is where the Shekhinah, His Shekhinah rests upon. And this Shekhinah rests upon the cherubs. And that is what actually happened in the Bet HaMikdash and the Kodesh Kodashim, where the Shekhinah would speak from the space, the tefach, the space of that was between the two cherubs. The two cherubs were not identical and could not be interchanged. The Torah had to write the word shnayim instead of shnei. One of the cherubs was a male and the other one was a female. And both of them were constructed out of gold. The two cherubs were male and female, and because the Torah wanted to teach us the children of Israel are beloved of Him, as the love that exists between man and woman. So already here we're starting to see the idea behind the cherubs is not just to get the message from what Hashem wants from us, but also that it represents the love and affection between a man and wife for a specific reason, which is the love that Hashem has for His nation. That's why they are in the image of a male and a female. Now the Gemara in Masechet Yoma, page 54, says that in the name of Rabbi Katina, that at the time when Am Yisrael were in the habit of appearing at the temple on during the three festivals, the three pilgrimages, which were required to go up to the Bet HaMikdash, to Yerushalayim, they used to roll back the dividing curtains, so to show the pilgrims the cherubs on top of the Aron HaKodesh, the ark. And these cherubs were embracing one another. And they would say to them, "See how beloved you are in the eyes of the Lord, just like the love that exists between a man and his wife." As the book of Kings 1, chapter 7, verse 36 says, the Kime'ar ish ve'levayot saviv, joined in an embrace of their arms like a man and woman. See, already we see something is very different about these cherubs than anything else. Generally speaking, when people learn about the cherubs, they don't learn what the Gemara in Masechet Yoma says. They learn that these were two gold statues of some kind or sculptures that were on top of the Kodesh Kodeshim. Of course, people know the images were of children, of babies, one male, one female. Many times you see a picture of two things that are identical, which is incorrect. But more than anything else, unless a person studies the Gemara in Masechet Yoma, which discusses the details of what transpired inside the Bet HaMikdash, they would never know that these cherubs were not just pieces of gold. They would actually come to life. They would move. And in fact, they were one of the ways that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Am Yisrael some of the most emotional things, some of the most extraordinary things that ever happened, especially during the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. The idea that the rabbis wanted to convey was that as opposed to the Gentiles, who require an intermediary in their approach to the Lord, the Jewish people are so beloved of God that they do not require an intermediary, just as man and wife do not require an intermediary, if they want to express their love for one another. For He, the exalted, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, leads Israel all by Himself, without the help of any intermediary. The Gentiles, on the other hand, are assigned to intermediaries, as we know from Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19. So this was the reason why the ark was placed in the Holy of Holies, which is the site where the Shekhinah resides, the ruin towards which all of Am Yisrael focused in prayer. Now that we have a little bit of background on the cherubs, we understand a little bit more. Number one, they weren't just pieces of gold. They would actually come to life. They would be one of the highlights of the high holidays. When people would come up to the Bet HaMikdash, they would actually open the Kodesh Kodeshim, that would typically only be available for the Kohen Gadol during Yom Kippur, but during the high holidays, they would actually open the curtains where Am Yisrael would see inside the Kodesh Kodeshim, and they would see where their status was by simply looking at the cherubs. Because when Am Yisrael did the will of Hashem, these cherubs would hug each other. But when Am Yisrael did not, the cherubs would give their back to each other. And this is in essence was supposed to show us where we stood, but the ultimate message of the cherubs was the expression of love that Hashem has for Am Yisrael that is irreplaceable, such as the one between man and his wife. Now, the Gemara in Masechet Yoma elaborates on what David HaMelech said when he said that there was a reproach that took place that broke his heart when the Ammonites entered the sanctuary and said, "Behold, their God," and they defamed the Cherubim. Now, of course, the destruction was a disaster of all disasters, but we don't need David HaMelech to tell us that the desecration of the Cherubim was something horrible. Obviously, there's an additional message here. There's a reason why David HaMelech is telling us. So first, the person needs to know that in the Gemara Masechet Yoma, it tells us that the images of the Cherubim were not just on the top of the Aron HaKodesh, but there was also on the walls, engravements on the walls. This made a very big difference between the first and the second Beit HaMikdash. But the Gemara says in Masechet Yoma, page 54a, where the images of the Cherubim were upon the walls still existed. As it's written in the book of Kings 1, chapter 6, verse 29, all the walls of the temple were surrounded by designs, an engraved network of figures, cherubim, palm trees, blossoming flowers. It's also written in Kings 1, chapter 6, verse 35, that he overlaid them with gold, which was flattened over the engraved designs. And lastly, in Kings 1, chapter 7, verse 36, it says, as joining of a man accompanied. What does it mean as joining of a man accompanied, the Gemara says? What is it, joining of a man accompanied? As a man is joined to his companion, his wife. Where just like Shlomo HaMelech says in the Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 5, I am sick with love. That was the expression of love between the cherubim to each other. Amar Resh Lakish. Resh Lakish says to us, teachings. When the Gentiles entered the sanctuary, this is during the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, they saw the cherubim joined together. They took them out to the marketplace. They took them off the walls, took them off of where they were, and brought them to the marketplace. And then made a big announcement. These Jews, whose blessing is a blessing, and whose curse is a curse, should be involved in these matters. Immediately they debased them, as it says in Lamentations chapter 1, verse 8, one of the books that Jeremiah the prophet wrote. All who once respected her debased her, for they saw her nakedness. So the question is, that we're trying to answer here, why would the Goyim view the two cherubs as something disgraceful? And in fact, bring shame, even more so. We just heard that the Gemara tells us in the multiple places that when Am Yisrael does the will of Hashem, then the cherubs were hugging each other. Just like they were, the Gemara was saying here. But the Gemara here said that the Am Yisrael obviously wasn't doing the will of Hashem, was doing quite the opposite. That's why Hashem destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. So why are they still hugging? So first we have to find out what's the fuss all about? Why are these goyim debasing the cherubs, making fun of Am Yisrael, in fact, making fun of God, and even more so, tried to figure out why they were hugging. Now, the Mefarshim go to town on this and discuss it extensively, where first we have to address the issue of why the Goyim were making fun of it. When the Goyim came in and saw that these two cherubs were inside the Kodesh Kodeshim, a man and a female, they started thinking, oh, they must be idolaters. Oh, they must be into pornography. Why? Because that's where their minds were. That's where the Goyim's minds were. And the reason why Hashem specifically put this intimate creation inside the Kodesh Kodeshim was specifically so it is actually hidden from most people. Because most people, unless they've elevated themselves, simply have no idea how to interpret this when they see male and female together. Why? Because they've dirtied their mind with so many images and actions during their life that immediately when they see two opposite genders embracing, showing an act of intimacy, immediately think of all of the filth that they've seen in their life. And even more so in our generation where the filth comes also digitally. So the image of the Cherubim was a loving embrace that perhaps was the most intimate depiction of the relationship between God and the Jewish people. And such intimacies, if they are to remain intimacies, must be concealed and in privacy, because once they're exposed for even a moment to outside eyes, immediately they're coarsened by the very exposure, meaning that immediately they lower a level, since the people that are looking at them would define it as something perverted, because they themselves have perverted minds. And the vulgar hordes in the marketplace were shown the holy Cherubim, but all they saw were two bodies physically united. And immediately the Gemara says they made fun of it. So immediately when somebody thinks of the Cherubim, if they haven't cleaned up their mind to a certain extent, then certainly they're going to see something, two bodies together, and they're thinking immediately some type of sexuality. Now, this is one of the things that the David HaMelech talks about, is that how these enemies of Am Yisrael made fun of something that is extraordinary. Now, the question is, why were they hugging? If they would have seen, let's say, the two Cherubim at the time of the Gemara tells us when Am Yisrael is not happy with us, where they have their backs to each other, they're not embracing, perhaps they wouldn't have made fun of it. But then you still have all of the stuff that was on the walls. But needless to say, why were they hugging? So the Chachamim say that the Gemara in Masechet Baba Batra, page 99a, teaches that according to one of the views, the Cherubim face each other only when the Jewish people are performing God's will. And when they're not, they face away from each other. So it seems strange that the Cherubim are actually facing each other and embracing at the time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Now the Rimigash, one of the sages, the comments on this, explains that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wished to offer the conquering Gentiles a glimpse of the love between him and the Jewish people. to show them where the Jews were in his eyes, even now, after the punishment, how much he still loves them. And he wanted to show this to the Goyim. Now the Rav Chaim Shmuelevitz, in his Sichot Musar, written about 50 years ago, gives a different explanation on it, where he says that it's because the destruction was taking place that HaKadosh Baruch Hu displayed his love through the cherubs, where there's a principle of divine justice that wherever a person is held to account for his misdeeds, he's at the same time honored for his noble ones. And the moral character of the nation had deteriorated to the point where God had no choice but to destroy his own temple and exile his own children. Yet at the same moment, this grievous sentence was being carried out. It had to be shown that there is an incorruptible essence within the Jewish people that would always remain beloved to Hashem. And to this end, Hashem decreed that the cherubs should face each other in a loving embrace. So he's in essence saying that Hashem is looking at all the good things that we still have, despite all the sins we made, and recognizing them at this time. The Goyim took it as if the Jews are supposed to be so close to Hashem, and he fulfills their blessings and their curses. When they bless, it's a blessing that comes true. When they curse, a curse comes true, just like Hashem promised Avraham Avinu, I'll bless those that blessed you and curse those that cursed you. How could it be that such holy people were dealing with what the Goyim viewed as something provocative? So we already know that, again, these are different expressions of love that Hashem is showing to Am Yisrael. But in order to truly understand the depth of the secret, we have to go to the world of the Baal Shem Tov, who gives an extraordinary insight, which is the basic foundation of Chassidut. And he says that the cherubs were not supposed to be hugging, according to the law. The law is, the Gemara tells us, when we do the will of Hashem, they hug. When they don't hug. They look opposite of each other. Some will say that maybe it's because Hashem is noticing some of the good things that we have. Some are saying that it's because Hashem wanted to show it to the Goyim that he still loved us. Some even said that it was a miracle for a negative result, meaning that Hashem made a miracle, but for negative outcome. But the Baal Shem Tov puts them all together and gives this perspective. He says that the cherubs were united during this destruction was because Hashem was showing us love before we leave. Just like his Torah commands us to show love to our wives during specific times, where the Gemara in Masechet Yevamot, page 62, says that a man is obligated to be intimate with his wife before he goes on a long trip. And the sages teach us it's specifically during that time, because that's when his wife desires him the most, because she starts thinking, when am I going to see him again? He's going to be gone for months, for years. And in the previous generation, people would literally go away for years. So there's a Torah obligation on the husband to be intimate with his wife before he leaves, in order to make sure that she knows that he loves her, that he cares about her, and express the utmost love during that time. And the Baal Shem Tov says, this is exactly what's happening here. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to destroy the Beit HaMikdash in order to save the people, even though many of the people, literally millions and millions of them, were murdered in cold blood. This had to happen in order to bring justice to the world. In order to save his people, he had to destroy part of them. But at the same token, he wanted to show them just how much he loves them, despite all of their flaws, despite all of their failures, despite all of their betrayal. He wanted to show them how much he loved them in the highest expression of love by having these two cherubs actually hug each other during this time. Because he wanted to let us know, yes, I know it hurts. And yes, I know you're going into the exile. And you don't know when you're going to come back. And you don't know how much suffering you'll have to endure before you come back. And this is why I want you to know that I love you and I'm coming with you. And that's why the prophet Isaiah in chapter 43, verse 13 says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the people, I came down to Babylon, for you. Meaning, I left Yerushalayim and I came down to Babylon because I want to be with you. That's how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us. And he tells us, when you are in your impurity, I am here with you. We're together. I'll sit here in the impurity with you. In essence, showing us an expression of love. Despite our betrayal, our cheating, our flaws, everything we've done, HaKadosh Baruch Hu literally shows us, I love you. And I'm coming with you. There's a law to keep. There's a Torah to uphold. But it doesn't mean I'm leaving you. I'm always going to be with you. And he showed us this expression of love through the cherubs. And the Baal Shem Tov tells us, this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to teach us, not only in those days, but in today. That the ultimate expression of love between a husband and wife cannot be met without truly understanding that this love cannot be replaced, cannot be based on conditions. You're wealthy, you're beautiful, you're skinny, you're fat, you have a nose this way, you have a nose... No. I'm with you through thick and thin. And when a couple is intimate, knowing this information, everything is elevated to a completely different level. Because if one of them is self-conscious, not because of any other reason other than the fact that they know that their spouse doesn't like their eyebrows, doesn't like their eyes, doesn't like their hair, doesn't like their hands, doesn't like whatever it doesn't like. And perhaps their spouse is unhappy about the financial condition. And the spouse is unhappy about this and that. If during that moment of intimacy, one of the people is thinking about how the other has somewhat put a condition on the love, condition on the relationship, certainly that ruins the intimate act from reaching its ultimate level. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to make sure that we know that despite all of the failures, He's with us. And He even made a supernatural miracle during this time by making this Kiruvim known to all of mankind. Now, of course, the filthy mind of the Gentiles that were destroying the Bet HaMikdash couldn't understand this secret, couldn't understand this love. To them, it seemed like we're either idol worshippers or we like pornography. Why? Because that's what's in their mind. And that's why they made fun of the whole thing. And the Ramban continues, and he says, and if you will understand the secret of the Cherubim and the voice that was heard from between them, you will understand the intent of our sages of blessed memory in saying that when the union of a man with his wife is in holiness, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is with them. As is described in the Gemara Masechet Sotah, page 17a, where Rabbi Akiva taught, when a man and his wife merit, the Shekhinah is with them. Yet if they do not merit, fire devours them. Which means that when a man is in union, in an intimate act with his wife, in holiness, the Shekhinah is with them. Meaning that when a man and his wife are in such a union where there is both know that this is not conditional, this is not temporary, this is not just for the pure servitude of lust, but rather this is the union between the couple as part of their ultimate expression of love, both for each other and for the Creator. This in itself turns them into what the Kiruvim were. Where just like the Shekhinah rested upon the Kiruvim, HaKodesh Baruch Hu himself comes to the act. Now I know that this sounds odd. And there is a former prophet that it also sounded odd to. We'll get to in a moment. But the key is to understand that this is only possible is if the union, the actual intimate act, is in holiness. Not if it's simply to provide somebody some type of relief for their lust. Now, Rabbi Akiva taught this, that when the man and his wife merit, the Shekhinah is between them, and when they don't, that there's fire. Where is this from? We see that the word Ish, man, has the letter Yud, which is one of the letters of the name of Hashem. And the word Isha, woman, has the letter Hey, which is also one of the letters of the name of Hashem. And if you take those two letters, the Yud and the Hey, together, you actually form another one of the famous names of Hashem. In English, you would spell it Y-A-H, Yah. Of the blessed God is with them. So you have the Ish, you have the Isha, and in the actual names of the Ish and the Isha is Hashem himself. But if they act only basely because they're aroused, in so many words, each person has physical needs. That's it. Nothing else. There's no expression of love for each other. There's no expression of love for the Creator. There's nothing connecting them to the servitude of Hashem. They simply have hormones they want to remove from their bodies. Then the Rambam says, they become heated as a flame, and the Shekhinah will leave them. And so it becomes fire, fire. This is since the name of Hashem, the Y-A-H, leaves man and woman, the remaining letters which spell Esh, Esh, fire, fire. And therefore the Ramban says, understand this, for here is contained the entire secret. And in regarding to this secret that our sages spoke of, when they said that there are three partners in man, and they are his father, his mother, and God, in Gemara Masechet Nida, page 31a, the Talmud also says that when a man honors his father and his mother, the Holy One, blessed be He, says, I consider it as if I had dwelled among them, and they had honored me. Meaning that, and this is Gemara Masechet Kiddushin, page 30b, meaning that if a person honors their parents, Hashem views it as if this is one of the holiest acts that exists in the world, when a man is actually with his wife and the Shekhinah is among them. Meaning that there's certain mitzvot that a person can do that could look like, not be quite it, but look like the greatest of all, the holiest of all acts. But nothing could replace the holiest of all acts, which is a holy act of intimacy between a man and his wife. And if there was something loathsome in this act, how could the blessed holy name of Hashem be included in such a thing? Meaning that in the name Ish, which is the man, and the name Isha, which is the woman, is the name of Hashem. If the act that unites them was loathsome, why would Hashem put his name, not only creating it, but actually put his name inside the act itself, the Isha Neisha? And therefore the Lord, may he be blessed and praised, says to Avraham Avinu regarding the birth of Yitzchak in the book of Genesis chapter 17 verse 16, and I will bless her, and moreover I will give you a son by her. And also he says in Genesis 25 verse 21 to Rivka, and the Lord let himself be entreated by him, and Rivka his wife conceived. In the case of Rachel and Leah, it says in the book of in the book of Genesis, and he opened her womb. In the case of Hannah, book of Samuel 1, chapter 1, verse 19, and Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and God remembered her. And amongst the blessings he promised her, there will be no barrenness or miscarriages in your land. Exodus 23:26. So here, the Ramban gives us almost a half a dozen different verses to show us that how holy this act is, where Hashem is, but most importantly, all of the verses have something in common, where the actual verses are discussing not just the intimacy, but one of the moments that the Shekhinah is specifically there, which is during conception. In Bereshit Rabbah, in the section 25, section 85:8, in the matter of Yehuda and Tamar, that's in Genesis 38:16, it says, and he turned unto her by the way, where Yehuda wished to go, but HaKodesh Baruch Hu suggested to an angel who was in charge of lust to influence him. We read in last week's parasha or 2 weeks ago, that Yehuda had 3 kids. 2 of his kids died, and then his wife died. Tamar was the wife of 2 of his sons, but she remained a widow. And she wanted to marry the 3rd son because she had a prophecy. She was the daughter of a prophet. She was the daughter of Shem, who was also called Melchizedek. And she had a prophecy that the Mashiach is going to come from Yehuda. And she wanted to be part of the salvation of the world, salvation of the Jewish people, the ultimate sanctification of HaKodesh Baruch Hu's name. She wanted to be part of it. And that's why it says that the Yehuda found Tamar to marry his sons initially, meaning that Yehuda had to convince her to marry his sons. The convincing part was the prophecy that she got that the Mashiach is going to come from Yehuda. Now, after the 2 sons, her former husbands, died, she wanted to marry the 3rd son, but she found out that Yehuda was not going to let her marry his 3rd son. He didn't tell her this, but she saw from his actions. And therefore, she wanted to make sure that she doesn't lose out on this opportunity to sanctify Hashem's name, to bring the ultimate sanctification of Hashem's name, to bring the Mashiach through her. And therefore she pretended to be a prostitute. But if it wasn't for Hashem's will, this plan would have never worked. Why? Because Yehuda was getting over the fact that his wife died. And the last thing on a person's mind usually is to go start something new, to even be with anybody new. And he was actually going on a way, and he was not planning on being with anybody until Hashem got involved and sent one of his angels that was in charge of lust to push Yehuda on Tamar in order to make the act actually happen. Now, of course, a person would say, well, how did Yehuda get it to express such a high level of holiness when he's with a prostitute? I mean, if you tell me he was with his wife, then yes, but if you're with a prostitute, this is where we have to simply understand that the Avot, the Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the 12 tribes were nothing like us. With the things that they were able to achieve, the things that they were able to do. And that's in essence what the Ramban says here. It's to inform us that the intention and desire of the Lord was in the union, and therefore twins were born from this. Both were tzaddikim, both were pure, both were like the sun and the moon, Perez and Zerach. And understand that they were born in design of the order of the world. They were part of the tikkun of the world. And there was nothing degenerate in their union, just as there is nothing repulsive in the perfection of the order of the world, neither in general or in any of its details. Now, interestingly, we see that the angel of lust was sent to push Yehuda on Tamar. Not to get him to do the act itself, not to be involved in the act itself in any way, but just to push him, to influence him, to go in that particular direction. Why? Because in this particular issue, when it comes to man and his wife and the unity, when it comes to man and wife and its conception, bringing a child, deciding when the child will be born, all of that is something that Hashem himself is the only one that does. He doesn't use messengers for this. And this is one of the things that Hashem wants to teach us here, that he doesn't use any angels as his messengers when it comes to the act of intimacy, which actually confirms the purity and the holiness of the intimate act. Now, the other time that HaKodesh Baruch Hu is specifically there is during the time of actual, not just the intimate act, but during the conception, the birth. But this is one of the things that is hard for an impure mind to understand. Where it says in the matter of Ruth, the Ramban brings a verse in the book of Ruth, chapter 4, verse 13, and the Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. If there was something repulsive in that, it has already been said, you are of the eyes too pure to behold evil. The Habakkuk, book of Habakkuk says, chapter 1, verse 13, that Hashem doesn't create any evil. There's a creation in its purest form. Everything is pure, even the animals that are impure. In their purest form, they're pure. One of the ways to understand it, I've heard this actually a great clarification on this by Rabbi Eliyahu, that to understand that a pig, which the Torah specifically says is not kosher, is pure, doesn't make any sense to someone that's religious and not necessarily versed in the teachings of Kabbalah, in the teachings of what happens in the worlds above. Why? Because the Torah itself says this is an impure animal. And in fact, make sure that you know that it's not only impure, but it's a special level of impurity where a Jew is not even allowed to raise pigs. Needless to say, they can't eat them. So is a lion, not allowed to eat them. But a lion doesn't even get as much of a bad rap as a pig does. But if a person understands the teachings of the sages, when it comes to the upper worlds, they would know that in its purest form, in the upper worlds, everything is pure. To such an extent that the creature itself doesn't look like it does here, where it actually has much more beauty. And in fact, it's only a semblance of what it is here. Why? Because if you would take, for example, each one of these creatures, whether it be pig, or it be a lion, or it be a human, or whatever it is, and you take them from the upper worlds and lower them here, there's a process. It has to go through multiple worlds until the Neshama comes here. Now, in the upper worlds, the pig and the lion have wings, and they're beautiful. And the people are beautiful. There's no deformities. There's no missing legs or limbs of any kind. There's no blindness. There's no impurity. Everything in its purest form, it's absolutely beautiful and majestic. But by the time it gets here, it loses a lot of it. And the reason for that is because just like, for example, if you take a stamp, let's say a stamp of your name, stamp of an address, and you take this stamp, and instead of just stamping once and then refilling the ink, you stamp 4 times, 5 times. What happens? The first time that you stamped, the ink was fresh. That's the first world. That's the highest level of worlds. That's the clearest message that there is. Second stamp, it's a little lighter. Why? Because you've already used some of the ink. Third stamp, already you're seeing a significant difference. By the time you got to the 4th stamp, although you still see the image of what you have originally stamped, it's very clear to anyone that looks at it that this is only a semblance of what you really have. It's not really what it is. This is the explanation for why the original majestic creation deteriorates as it comes down to this world. Now, because Hashem himself, he didn't create anything impure. But in order for that purity to come down to this world, it has to go through a certain process. And therefore we find in the words of the worthless Greek, he's talking about Aristotle, may his words be nullified, that he thinks that the intimacy is unholy, animalistic. But the Rambam says it's exactly the opposite. Because for when union between a man and his wife is for the sake of heaven, it's done in holiness, there is nothing holier and purer than it. Meaning, a person can learn Torah, a person can do mitzvot, put on tefillin, put on a new talit with ta'atara, keep Shabbat, whatever it is. All of those things are amazing. But they're not in the same world as intimacy done in holiness between a man and his wife. The difference between the two is like the expression that we had, or the example that we had with the stamps. And the verse that the Ramban brings that brings us to the next point and connects the two is the words of the prophet Jeremiah, where Hashem says to Jeremiah in chapter 1 verse 5, when it comes to the union of the tzaddikim, in essence the creation of new tzaddikim, Hashem says, before I formed you in the belly, I knew you. Before I formed you, I already knew you. What does that mean? The Gemara in Masechet Nida says that at the moment a seed comes out of the husband, there's a special angel named Laila that takes the seed and brings it to HaKodesh Baruch Hu and asks him what will be with the seed. Man, female, alive, dead, what age will they live? How many kids will they have? Will they be rich, poor, beautiful, ugly? What will they be? The question is, does Hashem really do that with every single seed or just specific ones? This was the prophecy that caused Bil'am HaRasha to lose his eye, where the Midrash says that when Bil'am saw what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does in Shamayim, he had a prophecy. And he says, in Parashat Balak, chapter 23, verse 10, Mimana afar Yaakov umispar et rov Yisrael, tamot nafshi mot yesharim v'ti achariti kamohu. Talking about Bil'am. Bil'am was counted the dust of Yaakov, or numbered a quarter of Israel. And he says upon himself, may my soul die the death of the upright, and may my end be like his. The Midrash says that at this moment, Bil'am had a prophecy and he saw what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at every single seed that comes out of the person, in essence counting it like dust, waiting to see when the tzaddik, when the righteous will come out. When Bil'am saw this, he said, how could God be holy if this is what he spends his day doing? And immediately the Torah says in chapter 24, continues talking about that prophecy. But then it says in chapter 24, Neum Bilam bno Beor uneum hagever setum ayin, that the words of Bilam, the son of Beor, the words of the man with an open eye, meaning that he only has one eye, not eyes. He lost his eye because he used these prophecy in a degrading manner and said degrading things. He lost his ability to see in one of his eyes. Now, the Ramban says he attributed the form of the righteous man to him, as if the blessed one drew the drop of seed drawn from the righteous, as if to say from Jeremiah, before I formed you, I knew you. But in the instance of the evil one, his drop is entirely impure, and the Lord has no share in him. Regarding the wicked, it said that the wicked is estranged already from the womb. Psalm 50, verse 4. And understand that all of the wicked are strange and foreign to any portion of the Lord, blessed be he. See, here the Ramban finalizes the section for today telling us that, as the Gemara says in Masechet Nida, page 31a, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu counts every seed of Am Yisrael waiting for the righteous person to come out. Why? Because as soon as that seed comes out, Hashem says, that's the tzaddik I've been waiting for. That's the tzaddikah I've been waiting for. That's the righteous one I've been waiting for. Patiently waiting for the righteous Neshama that's going to serve him. Now, when the Kohen Gadol entered the Kodesh Kodashim, and he saw the expression of intimacy between the Cherubim, where they would hug each other in a very affectionate way, and there's images of a man and woman on the walls of the Kodesh Kodashim, the holiest place. If he thought for a moment about his own wife or anything else inappropriate, on the spot he would die. And this is why the Kohen Gadol, the Gemara tells us, had a chain around his leg that stretched out to outside of the Kodesh Kodashim, because it had bells on it. If the bells were ringing, that means that the Kohen Gadol was moving. And he was doing this, serving Hashem inside there. But as soon as the bell stopped ringing, the people on the outside knew that the Kohen Gadol has died. Now, if he thought about a man and woman in an inappropriate way, after looking at the Cherubim, he would die instantly. Which teaches us that the Kohen Gadol, by the time he went into the Kodesh Kodashim, he had to elevate himself to the same level of holiness as Adam HaRishon and Chava, where they did not recognize their own nakedness as shameful. Where he elevated himself as a servant of Hashem, that he saw the cherubs as an act of intimacy between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his people, as an expression of the ultimate love between Hashem and his people, symbolized by the act of intimacy between a man and his wife. But if he views the act between a man and his wife, whether it be his wife or somebody else's wife, if he views it in the same manner as most people do, on the spot he dies. Because that filth cannot exist inside the Holy of Holies. So the Kohen Gadol had to be so holy inside his mind, since Hashem knows what's going on in your mind, that he had to elevate himself to the same level as Adam HaRishon, as Adam and Chava. Now, this is also why the Gemara in Masechet Yomah, page 52b, says that the Kohen Gadol did not lengthen his prayers when he was inside the Kodesh Kodashim. He would just do his prayers, whatever he needed to do there, and get out of there as soon as possible. Why? Because, again, one inappropriate thought about something you're seeing, needless to say, things you're experiencing and are very well aware of, one inappropriate thought and he dies. So immediately, he literally would allow himself to get into the highest level of holiness, highest level of focus, highest level of servitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but at the same token, knowing his limitations as a human, and thereby finish the servitude and his prayer as fast as possible. Now, knowing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, that I shall not see a thing of nakedness among you and run away from you. A person that understands what immorality is, even if it's in the mind, and how much damage it would have caused the Kohen Gadol, needless to say how much this causes an individual when they have inappropriate thoughts when they're together with their spouse. Because if a person has the right thoughts, the right level of holiness in their mind, they literally transform themselves into the cherubs, that they carry the Shekhinah. And in fact, the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, the Shla HaKadosh, writes the following extraordinary insight on this particular topic in Parashat Vayigash. He says that if Adam HaRishon, if man and his wife, were able to maintain their innocence and not sin, then the drop of semen from which the fetus develops would have never been called a tipa sucha, an evil-smelling drop. Needless to say about someone today. If the act is done in holiness, then the seed is no longer considered as a evil-smelling drop, a tipa sucha, that's mentioned across the Torah and Pirkei Avot and everywhere that seed comes out of a person. It's tipa sucha. You're made out of a tipa sucha. So what does it become if it's not tipa sucha, if it's not an evil-smelling seed? It would actually be called a zera kodesh, a holy seed. And the subject of copulation and sex would not be the subject surrounded by shame and embarrassment. In fact, it would be an act of mitzvah. Mitzvah performance no different than that of the phylacteries, the tefillin. It would be performed publicly, without shame or embarrassment. An act which is not inspired, at least partially, by the evil urge, is not something associated with shame and embarrassment. Now that Adam and Chava sinned, the act became associated with shame. So here the Shla HaKadosh in his Luchot HaBrit tells us something out of this world, something that cannot be comprehended by a normal person, that's not Kodesh Kodeshim himself or herself. He's telling us that the reason why Adam HaRishon and Chava and Eve did not feel any shame was because initially they were so holy that every single move they made was for the purpose of serving the Creator. Eat for the purpose of Creator. Drink for the purpose of the Creator. Copulate for the purpose of the Creator. Everything was for the purpose of the Creator. The moment they made an act that was not for the purpose of the Creator, which is eat from the tree of knowledge, it was not a pure act for the sake of the Creator. There was some curiosity there. There was some disobedience there, and all types of things. The second they did that, everything else lowered its level. Everything else was lowered a level, and all of a sudden there's an option of doing everything else not for the purpose of the Creator. Because you've already done one thing not for the purpose of the Creator, you could also do other things that are not for the purpose of the Creator. And therefore their next act of intimacy was not for the purpose of the Creator. In the same fashion that it could have been. Because had Adam and Chava never made the sin, then any time they would procreate, and anybody else after that would procreate, would be intimate. Even not for the sake of reproduction. The act itself would reach such a level of holiness, it wouldn't be any different than putting on tefillin, keeping Shabbat, eating kosher, and therefore would actually literally be done in public, like any other mitzvah. Now, of course, the average mind thinks filthy, disgusting things when they think, oh, in public, oh, so there would be this and this, and all. Obviously, this is the reason why I said in the beginning of Shiur, this Shiur is not for everyone, because the average person will naturally get dirty thoughts because they've dirtied their mind already. But if a person has purified themselves to some extent, or is trying to at the very least, they can at least understand the concept of holiness during intimacy, that it literally should have originally been in its purest form and the highest level. it should have been no different than you observing any other mitzvah out there, and therefore no shame is associated with it, and therefore doing it in public would be of no problem. But the moment Adam HaRishon sinned and brought that choice to the world to do something for the sake of heaven and not to do it for the sake of heaven, obviously everything had changed. We're no longer able or allowed even to do anything in public, of course. We have to maintain modesty. There are people, even if a person sanctified themselves, that doesn't mean that their world around them is sanctified, but it doesn't mean that you could no longer sanctify yourself through the act. Only now it would be in private, where a couple could be intimate for the sake of heaven, as part of their servitude of Hashem, as the expression of love that they have for each other, in the same level as the expression of Hashem's love to Am Yisrael by having the Kiruvim, where they're inseparable, they're together, they're embracing with complete intimacy. The love is unconditional. The love is full of holiness. The love is never ending. If a couple can do the same thing, then their act also brings the Shekhinah, just like they are the Kiruvim themselves. And that's why the seed that comes out of the husband's body is no longer considered a tipas srucha, an evil-smelling putrid seed, but rather it's considered a zera kodesh, a holy seed. And that's what Yaakov Avinu says to his son Reuven when he gives him the blessing, that Reuven, you are my firstborn, my strength and my first vigor, in Genesis chapter 49 verse 2. Why? Yaakov is telling his son Reuven, the first seed that ever came out of my body produced you. Why is that of any significance? Because that means that Yaakov sanctified himself to such a level that he never had these nocturnal dreams and emissions where it would come out of during his sleep, like it happened to Adam HaRishon, because that was part of the tikkun of Adam HaRishon that Yaakov fulfilled. Where when Adam HaRishon ate from Etz Hadat and then realized that his action will lead to bringing descendants that also don't follow Hashem, and therefore those descendants will go to Gehenom, he immediately separated from his wife for 130 years. And only once he saw through prophecy that some of his descendants will serve Hashem because they're going to receive the Torah of Mount Sinai, then he returned to his wife. But during those 130 years, seed came out of his body while he was sleeping. And that seed created things that we don't want in this world. So there had to be a tikkun done. Yaakov Avinu, who had the image of Adam HaRishon, he protected himself and sanctified himself to such a level that for 84 years that he was in the world, not a single seed left his body. And the first one that came out produced his firstborn son, Reuven. When a person sanctifies himself, where they protect their eyes, they protect their brit, they protect their mouth, both what's coming in and what's coming out, that person is certainly capable and fit to sanctify HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name even during the act of intimacy. And in fact, in the highest level during the act of intimacy. But if a person has a potty mouth, if a person has eyes that look at everything that walks, if a person disregards the mitzvot and disregards the fact that his wife is disregarding the mitzvot, then everything that we just said is not even relevant to them. Why? Because they're on the other side. The side that talks about, what if you don't do any of this stuff? What if you don't sanctify yourself? What if you don't listen to Hashem? What if you just simply do what everybody else does? You have a lust, you have a desire, you have a physical need. Do what you gotta do. What happens then? Well, we already know they're not going to be compared to the cherubs. And the Shekhinah is certainly not going to rest on them. We already know they're not going to sanctify Hashem's name, and their expression of lust is certainly not going to be part of their servitude of God. But we did hear that the Shekhinah leaves them, and all that's left is fire. What does it mean? Fire. That is what we'll learn next week, Be'ezrat Hashem. Because today, we learn enough to know that the cherubs were not just a couple of statues, a couple of gold figures. They were literally a representation of angels, as well as the expression of unlimited and unconditional love that Hashem has for us, that we ourselves have to have for our spouses. Not just during times where it's sending a text message during a day, but rather during the most intimate of times. If a person expresses that level of love during that time, certainly Kedusha will come out of them. Holy children, holy marriage, holy lives, and holy eternities. For those that didn't want to listen, for those that don't want to listen, for those that simply have a Yetzer Hara that's telling them what to do. Next week, we'll discuss what happens when you simply don't do any of this stuff. And what does the fire part really mean? Thank you for learning with me. Hopefully those of you that watched this show enjoyed it. Be'ezrat Hashem, we are continuing to grow in these teachings of attaining true holiness in the Jewish home. And Be'ezrat Hashem, next week, we'll grow together even further. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen. You see the giants behind me? They're changing the world. Rav Elchanan Wasserman, alav hashalom, made sure that his students were spiritually fed and physically fed, day after night, with the truth of Torah. Rav Ovadia Yosef spent his days and nights learning and teaching Torah, feeding the world with the truth in every way that he could. At Be'ezrat Hashem, we've been doing the same exact thing, following their huge footsteps, day after day, night after night, making sure that the world sees the truth in multiple languages, and anyone that wants to learn the truth has the opportunity to do so. At the same time, feeding as many people in Eretz Yisrael that we could. And Baruch Hashem, over the last year, we've reached new milestones. Over 100,000 people were fed in the past year in Eretz Yisrael. Poor people that couldn't afford to even pay their rents were helped in every way that we could. At the same time, our videos have been watched millions of times around the world, whether it's my videos or Rabbi Ephraim's videos or one of the other amazing Avrechim's videos in different languages. Were watched so many times that it's transformed lives. In this year that's coming up, we want to do more. And we want partners, more partners. And if you are already our partner, we want you to partner up with us even more than we did in the past year. Because there's simply much more to do, to follow these huge footsteps, to fill these huge footsteps that Rav Ovadia, Rav Elchanan Wasserman, and the rest of Gedolei Yisrael left for us to fill. Please, be generous, commit, and let us reach even bigger milestones in this coming year to make sure that the name of Hashem is publicized in every corner of the world. Thank you again for your partnership. Thank you again for your learning. And thank Hashem for giving us the opportunity to unite the world with the truth of Torah.